I've been asked to talk about my elephant experience in elephant hunting, and it's a very vast subject, especially as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to break it down into phases, and the phase one will be how I was introduced to it, to elephant hunting, and how I was mentored and taught by one of the old greats, old Willie de Beer, who was the warden in charge, or the senior ranger in charge of Mbalauta, but we'll get onto that just now. I began, or got my interest was piqued in elephant hunting when I was a young boy of about 10, and I was able to go with this friend of mine whose father was a district commissioner, excuse me, to hunt elephant in the tribal areas, take out elephant for that were causing problems, crop raiding elephant, shoot an elephant for rations in times of drought for the people, and so on. So it was very interesting from a young age to go along and watch this old friend of mine, who's also long gone now, hunting elephant, and that sort of piqued the interest. But years and years later, when I was in the army and based at Mbalauta with One In-Depth Company, Willie de Beer was the warden there, or the senior ranger, and these stations used to be given a quota that they would take off from head office, quota of reduction in the numbers, excuse me, because numbers are built up too much for the vegetation and so on, and they couldn't do big culling operations because of the war going on. So the separate stations like Mbalauta, Lundi, and so on were given quotas of what they could take off during the year. And Willie de Beer had a quota of 100 elephant to take off. And he said to me, was I interested to learn how to hunt elephant properly? And I said, of course, I really was. And so the learning started. And every night I had to go and eat down at his house, which was down the other end of the airfield. And remember, after dinner, we'd sit next to each other on the couch and have a look at this elephant book. And I had a sharpened matchstick, and he would say, there would be a picture of an elephant, and he'd say, right, point out side brain. And I'd have to point out a side brain. He'd say, okay, 3/4 brain. The next page would be an elephant going away, 3/4 brain going away. Another one, 3/4 brain coming at you. Another one, frontal brain. And each time I made a mistake, he'd whack me on the head with a little Mapani stick that he had, and I'd have to redo it. So this went on for a week, and I had all these lumps all over my head. And then at the end of the week, he said to me one day, okay, young man, I think we're ready for this. He said, get into the armory there, and he had the big walk-in armory at Mbalauta, and select yourself a rifle, and at the same time, dry clean my 470 Wilkes double rifle. So I was like a kid in a candy store, you can imagine. I went into the armory, or to the walk-in safe, and there were all these weapons lining the walls, in racks. And I found this 505 Gibbs rifle. And I held it and I thought, boy, this is it. This is what I'm going to use. So I saw the Willems 470 double there, took it out the case, dry cleaned it, and then put it all together, went through, put his rifle on the desk for him, laid it across the desk, and then I went in with a 505 Gibbs. And he said to me, well, I don't know what you're doing with that piece of rubbish. He said, take that piece of crap back and get that 375 there, the nice shiny silver one that the Game Scouts use on work, and you bring that Parker Hale 375 in, because that's what you'll be using. And the lesson here was he wanted me to not rely on the caliber or the size of the bullet, but rather to have the minimum caliber that I was allowed to use, which would by law was a 375, and because of that I'd have to place the bullet in the right place to make sure I killed the animal. Now, in hunting elephant, like in other dangerous game, but particularly with elephant, it's a huge mass of an animal, but within it are these small targets which are its vitals, and in order to kill it, you have to hit those vitals. And this is why the penetration and the right bullet placement and so on is so important. You don't want to wound it. We did all the shots. We went on to heart and lung shots. We did back spinal shots. We did wounded animal running away from you, left and right hip shots. We went through the whole 9 yards. So anyway, he said to me, right, we're ready. Brought out my old 375, the shiny Parker Hale. We climbed into the vehicle and off we went. Graham Hall was another senior ranger down at Lundi, and he was up in the Super Cub. And this was pre-arranged, I didn't know this, between him and Willem. And we went out and we stopped the vehicle. I had a couple of soldiers with me as protection, and they had a radio, and they stood behind Willem, and I stood next to Willem about a meter apart, and with a short scrub Mapani, and we could hear the drone of this Super Cub coming towards us. And Graham Hall every now and again would break onto the radio and say, okay, Willem, there's 3 bulls coming towards you. This looks like a good little group to take out. Okay, they are 200 meters, and then he'd say, okay, get ready, they're about 100 meters. And I looked across at old Willem, and he was standing there with his double rifle broken over his arm, like he was some English gentleman on a bird shoot, with 2 cartridge cases in there, obviously, but the weapon wasn't closed. And I grabbed the rifle and I'm now ready to load. He said, not yet. So I was okay, and I stood there, and we could hear the Graham Hall coming closer and closer, and then eventually about 75 yards, 50 yards away, he said, okay, you can load your first round in there now. And no, don't put your rifle up, keep it down, stand by, I'll take orders from me. I said, okay. And the next thing, old Graham Hall said, they're almost on top of you, Willem. They're about 50 meters away. They're going to break out of the cover soon. And right then, 3 bulls came bursting out of this short scrub Mapani and saw us and came straight at us. Willem still had his rifle broken open, was standing there like this old English gentleman hunting birds, and rubbing his eye from the lion wound that where it had been badly mauled years before. And I was standing there with the rifle. Like he said, okay, safety gauge off. Now the elephant were coming flat out. And then I saw them drop the guy that was slightly in the front, dropped his, he was in the middle, and he was like a couple of paces ahead of the 2 bulls, one left and one right of him. And he dropped his head. He could see me, and he was coming straight for us, frontal charge. And he kept coming, and Willem said, okay, now frontal shot. And I came up, shot him in the frontal brain shot. He collapsed immediately. He said, reload, right, going away, side shot, bang on the 3/4 brain shot on the right hand one. Reload, left one, going away, left brain shot. And I did the 3/4 left brain shot as the other one turned slightly and tried to gap it to the left. Anyway, the end of it, there were 3 elephants lying 10 yards apart, all dead. And we went up and made sure they were dead, finished them off with a second round, but it wasn't required. But obviously the teaching had paid off, and we went on to do more and more of that teaching. So we're going to do this in phases. This is just part of the teaching phase, and the next one we'll do will be private elephant hunting.